Good morning and welcome, colleagues. I'm Ai Lian from the Gifted Education branch, and I will be your facilitator for this session. This session is related to the discussion and Mr. Devon's keynote about the relevance of STEM, humanities, and STEAM earlier, right? There was quite a lot of questions actually on Pigeonhole on this issue. And I guess, we can see for ourselves how whether one is more relevant than another or all of them are equally relevant and feed into one another. Okay, we are privileged to have with us today Dr. Kenneth Lim, research scientist at NIE, and his team, all students from SJI and his colleague Estella from NIE. Right. They will share with us 3 interdisciplinary projects at the intersection of data science, artificial intelligence, STEM, and the humanities. Kenneth's work in this field is internationally recognized. He has more than a decade's experience working with school personnel, both locally as well as in East and South Asia, on the design of curricular enactments which foreground learner intuition via phenomenological perspectives. In recognition of his expertise in the mediation between maker culture and learning, Kenneth was invited by UNESCO as a plenary speaker of the 2016 Asia Pacific Conference for Educational Innovation and Development. Kenneth also sits on the editorial board of Computers and Education Open and was lead editor of the 2020 special issue of the British Journal of Educational Technology on augmented reality. Please join me to welcome Dr. Kenneth Lim and his team. Kenneth, please.
Thank you, Ms. Chee. Hello, colleagues. Good morning. Thank you for choosing to spend time with us today. I come to you today as a fellow educator, and I came from the teaching service. I've been in the service for the past 30 years. I have also taught in, I see colleagues from the Raffles family and from Anglo-Chinese. I come from those two families as well, having been a hybrid or blended product of the two families. So it's my privilege today to speak to each of you. I'm joined today by 5 of my students actually. As Ms. Chee said, we have a pair from SJI Senior School, a pair from SJI in Sec 3, and one of my own students here at the NIE who is training hard to join the service in the years to come as a history teacher. So I speak to you as a geography teacher, and today we'll try to present. Today we'll try to share stories from across the disciplines. It was very heartening to hear our keynote speakers' perspectives on the intersection or the relative balance between STEM and the humanities, and hopefully as the stories you hear today unfold, we'll come away at the end of the 1.5 hours with a better understanding of the complementarities between our respective disciplines. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first pair of students. They're currently in Sec 3, and they are Min An and Min Tuan. So An and Tuan from St. Joseph's Institution, I hand the time over to you now. I will share the screen for your presentation.
Everyone, my name is Min Tuan, and with me today is Min An, and we're from St. Joseph Institution. We're very honored to be sharing with you our research on the effects of microclimate on humans' emotions and health. Okay, so on to the next slide.
Hang on.
So who are we? We are a pair of 2 Vietnamese scholars arriving in Singapore in December 2020, and after living there for a few months, we see how people generally feel better when they are in Singapore and what is considered the cleanest country in the world. However, as us being students, we don't know if it was kind of just a biased judgment about how we tend to feel towards humans, Like if it's too hot, then we will feel very irritated. And so we hypothesized that there should be an underlying relationship between the environment and human. So after we done to a bit of literature, according to a study by Liu et al. In 2019, climate change has reduced human thermal comfort and health in urban outdoor environments. And it is important to find out how the human body responds, both psychologically and physiologically, to different microclimates. Now, microclimates can impair body thermal regulation with serious consequences. This has been conducted in a study by Marcelli et al. In 2016. And for example, when you are from a very cold environment, for example, the bus, and you step out into a hot and humid environment, for example, outside, you would perspire more and you breathe more, indicating that your heart rate has increased. A microclimate also has an impact on functioning of our brains. Like for example, sound is a kind of pollution, and high level of sounds can affect us, the different wave levels in our brains, which will lead us to different emotions. And currently, there's little research on the relationship between microclimate and humans' emotions and health. And there's also no device which can measure and analyze the connection between both microclimate and biometric data. And we also included our EEG data. Our engineering goal is to build and program a device that can measure microclimate and biometric data so that data collected can be used to improve the environment, the well-being of humans and the community. So we want to talk a bit on our focus on finding the different relationships. So our project aims to unveil the relationships in the following areas. Firstly, is the environment's conditions. Secondly, is the human brain. And finally, the physiological and mental well-being of human. Now, according to the diagram, you can see how are the four different relationships that we're trying to uncover. Okay, I will talk a bit on our timeline, what we have accomplished so far, and what are our goals into the future. So in June 2021, we have successfully assembled our environmental sensor into a compact device that are portable. In July 2021, we have started to collect our biometric data. In October 2021, we have successfully collected our EEG data. And into the future, in December 2021, we are intending to finish analyzing relationships. And in January 2022, we'll be finishing documenting our research. And into the future, we intend to expand our research even more. I will hand over my time to Nguyen to talk more about the methods and the results.
Yes, so as you can see, as Tuan explained, our aim and main objectives of the project, you notice that our project is a embedded IoT and then machine learning project, which means firstly, we need embedded, which means we have to build a prototype or a device that can measure our the data that we want to discover. Those sensors, we actually have to build our own sort of prototypes. In this way, we actually, for the motherboard, the microcontroller, we used the ESP8266, which is based on Type 4, which is usually been used for this type project for its simplicity. And yes, so we actually conceptualized and then we designed, and we actually have to assemble this design that can measure noise level, light intensity, amount of dust, carbon dioxide concentration, temperature, humidity, and pressure. And as you can see on the right is the exterior and interior of our prototype. And yes, we built it from our household items. We actually use the box that we can find in the normal markets, as well as clothing clips. Okay, next slide. And that is for the environmental data. For the biometric data, we did consider using open source sensor, but because of the fact that most open source sensor for these type of data are not very highly reliable. So we actually choose to use the smartwatches that are available in the market. So we use Huawei band and Fitbits, like to measure heart rate variability, oxygen saturation, and skin temperature. And as well, the data from both the biometric and environmental sensors are then sent to our server, which is then processed on Google Drive and stored in Excel. This is Internet of Things or IoT. And we have a different kind of data, which is the self-assessed emotions and biometric data. So now we have the data to measure the environment and our body. We want a top data to store how the participants feel about their environment, how the environment makes them feel. So the five participants age 16 will carry the device and smartwatches with them for 2 weeks. That is the initial period. But currently our data has gone up to 6 months, which is quite significant. And the participants were also required to fill in a questionnaire on Google Form twice a day to self-assess their mental and physical well-being based on the environment, which is also synchronized on our server. Okay, next slide. Now that we have our normal data, recently we also add another type data, which is called electroencephalography, which is the measure of brain waves. Now, we of course have to use the electrodes and bought from a reliable vendors, but we also have to build our own helmet because the 3D printed helmet that are available on the market are quite expensive. So this is actually a special sort of gimmicks of our project is we actually design most of the device ourselves using DIY and household items like double-sided tapes and sponge. The helmet actually helps to hold the sensor in place, and the sensor that we can collect from this type of device are in terms of time series, which is quite dense. So the normal kind of machine learning that is successfully used for all type of data is quite inefficient for DEG. So we need to use a more different method, more complex method, using CNN, DNN, which is a specific kind of deep learning, and we also have to use preprocessing and fast-forward transform. And in the diagram below, you can see the system that we are using. In the middle is the 1020 system, which is the location system that we're using for our project. And on the right is the design of this helmet. Okay, next slide. Now that we got our data, the next step is the analyzing process. For the biometric and environmental data, we actually have to, the pre-processing process is to identify and remove outliers from data, and then we have to train a random forest regression model to sort of make a model to uncover the relationship between these type of data. And finally, we use a Shapley plot to provide us with more complex insights onto the regression model. And now for the EEG data is more complex because we need to pre-process and then extract relevant data from the time series, and then, as I said before, applying deep learning, which is CNN or RNN. And then we have to infer relationships between different types of data based on our regression model. Okay, yes, I just want to. On the right side is on the first picture is actually a true values and predictions of one of our early model, and below that is the time series of the EEG data, and below that is actually a frequency-based data that we extracted from the time series data of the EEG. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the result that we collected from 2 weeks. Of course, now that we are over 6 months old data points is actually over 40,000 data points, but this is just the early result. As you can see, the score there, some score are over 72 and some score is not too high. But overall, we say that for the early result like this is quite successful. Now, we also, of course, we have several inferences that we can make from our data that the carbon dioxide concentration actually affect our heart rate variability, and short-term heart rate variations. Temperature affect our body and sleep score, and infrared radiation affect our stress level. Of course, this is just the early result, and the new result actually we are finishing up and will be in our the new paper that we are making.
Okay, so I will talk about our discussion. So after conducting our research, the most significant microclimate factors that we found are carbon dioxide concentration, temperature, pressure, and infrared radiation. The devices and data obtained, we believe, can be used to improve the environment and well-being of the community in the following ways. Firstly, it would be very realistic to integrate it into an ecosystem of smart homes, where it can analyze the user's biometric data and then automatically adjust the microclimate inside their homes where the users are in to their likings and health conditions. Next, we believe that it should be integrated into personal health devices. Now, we're not talking about any regular smartwatches. We're thinking about how the device can take the biometric data of the users and sync it with the environmental data they can take it on the weather database, so that if there is any abnormalities in the data and the results that they analyze, they can automatically inform and call the family and doctors so that they can respond in time. And finally, we believe that it can be used to improve the residents' life satisfaction and productivity. This has also been suggested in Palmer and Savalti research in 2020, and this we believe that the government can restructure or redesign urban cities so that geographically they can be a more pleasant place for citizens to work and live in. In conclusion, our prototype was successful to a certain extent. We believe that there are some limitations to it. We have a very small number of participants, age group, and we have a very short duration for data collection. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, since we cannot go out a lot, then the diversity of microclimate data is also reduced. And finally, we think that our prototype size is quite bulky to carry around as well. And for the improvements and extensions we're going to make, we're going to conduct it with a larger number of participants with different age groups and for a longer duration to improve the accuracy of the model. And the vision model can be improved by adding more data to it. So we have improved it because we have collected the data over 6 months now. And mean radiant temperature can be added to show the energy burden on participants. And finally, the ongoing research of our group is that we're going to analyze the effect of microclimate on brain activity to be investigated with electroencephalogram measurements. Okay, next we'll be sharing a little bit about our experience. So it all started because of COVID-19. We see a force of nature that can impact our life drastically. And therefore, we really signed up for the Nanyang Research Project to do a little bit of research and gain insights into this matter. And at the point of time, we didn't really think that we can extend our project to this very huge, vast scope. But then we really want to make a difference in people's lives. And so we decided that we would cover as much of the aspects of the problem as possible. And so we've learned to be very cautious in the process. As this project scope is vast, it's really easy to lose our way when we dream of something too big, and without taking everything that we have at the moment into account. And finally, I think that being resourceful is one of the lessons we have learned in this time we conduct this research, as there is many processes to be done and many problems that we need to overcome. And living in this pandemic times, not all modern equipment or resources are available and in our reach. And so we have to come up with ways to overcome problems with the thing that we have on hand. Okay, I will hand back my time to Nguyen to share a little bit more about his experience.
My experience is actually quite different from Tuan, because I'm as someone who already have background in embedded programming as well as IoT. Going to this project, our original project aim is just to measure the microclimate data. And as we talk with our supervisor, Dr. Lim, what she fingers that we want to make something different. And as Tuan said, we settle with this very big scope. But this is one thing that I find quite interesting. From a small scope project, we actually managed to find a standing for ourselves, something that only we who are interested in this pushing sort of project. And the thing is, this is actually, I think, this a big gateway for me and Tuan is to work of researching, because during this project we learned how to make a proper research, how to ask for professional help, and a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And yeah, it is one big opportunity. And actually, I learned a lot more about the fields that I do not even familiar with before this project. So yes, I'm quite thankful for what we were able to do. And yes, I think again I would to end off this experience sharing, I would say this project is quite a journey for us, and we appreciate every step away. And I will pass back to Tuan to end off this presentation.
On to our next slide. These are our references for our literature review as well as the contents we mentioned above. Okay, next slide, please. We would like to thank Dr. Kenneth Lim, Mr. Ahmed for the invaluable guidance and advice in our project, our mentor, Mr. Carlo, for his invaluable guidance and advice on our data analysis, and our teacher, Mr. Tan, for his invaluable guidance and support throughout the project.
Thank you, Anne and Tuan. Have you finished? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Colleagues, that was it's been a privilege to be able to have worked with Minh Anh and Minh Tuan over the past year, and if with your Ai Lian, would you like to open for any pressing questions or save the questions to the end?
Let's save the questions for the end. They can also type in the chat first if they have any.
Okay. So, oh yes, before I forget, we will also be happy to share the presentation slides with you through the GE branch. Yeah. Okay. So our next sharing today is by Miss Estella Tan, who is currently training, who is currently a BA doing her bachelor's at the NIE in the Humanities and Social Studies Education academic group, training to be a history teacher, about to enter our teaching service. So I think Estella's sharing will be a good counterpoint to what you've just heard from our SJI students, and hopefully we will be able to draw some connections to the some of the points raised by our keynote speaker earlier this morning. Estella, would you be able to? I'm going to share your screen now, okay? I'm going to try.
Yes, thank you so much, Kenneth.
Yeah, okay. So here goes. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Kenneth. Hi everyone, I'm Estella. I'm currently a third year student studying history and social studies at NIE. So today I'll be presenting about my project on mapping out old shipping routes using the coding language R language and its platform R Studio. Next slide. Okay, so what is it about? It was actually roughly a half a semester long project. So it was about 3 months that I undertook for one of Kenneth's modules at NIE as part of an introduction into coding. So prior to this project, I actually had no experience with coding. I've never interacted with coding either. So it was something that was very new for me as well. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to make use of pre-existing data from online sources to produce a map of 18th and 19th century shipping to understand the trading interactions that took place. Next slide. So the main reasons for why I wanted to carry out this project is because coding and data science is not usually associated, especially with the study of history. But in recent years, I realized that it has found a lot of popularity with historians, especially because of its ability to be able to manipulate big data in order to spot trends. So Kenneth actually encouraged me to try and find if it was possible to bridge history with coding and data science with regards to, I think, teaching and education. So what I wanted to do for this particular project was to see how I could perhaps get students interested in perhaps the causes for the changes that took place over time. So by looking at the map, although we only see a certain picture, maybe certain questions can be raised by students, such as asking about why there's a sudden increase in trade interactions with China and Japan during the late 19th century. And hopefully through that, getting students to explore the causes. And then also learning how data can be processed and utilized. So data can be manipulated in different ways in order to reveal various historical trends, especially through coding. So I found it personally quite useful in terms of dealing with numbers, because with language and speeches, it's easy to see a kind of trend that goes on, but with numbers, it may be harder to observe certain trends. And also through this project, hopefully to be able to increase relatability, to show how I think the world is already so globalized already during the 18th and 19th century, similar to our world today, and hopefully to get students more interested in history. So next. Yeah. So this is the general methodology that I found that best worked for me personally after experimenting around, and also based on advice from colleagues from Kenneth's team. So what I did was that the first thing I did was to find a relevant data set. So I looked for a data set in particular with dates and locations. And then the next thing I did was to find out which codes could be used to manipulate the data. So as I mentioned earlier, I had no experience with coding whatsoever prior to this project. But thankfully, there were a lot of tutorials and projects, similar projects especially, who share their codes for others to use for their own projects. So the community is actually quite helpful into helping first-time coders and amateur coders as well. So the last thing I did was to just key in the data sets and the relevant codes into RStudio, which is the platform that is used for our language. And then from there, I could manipulate the data in order to create a visual map. Yeah. So the next slide. So why did I choose to go with a visual map? Because I felt that for this particular project, it was the most suitable in terms of easier interpretation. And hopefully I was hoping that it could reveal other aspects that I myself would not have known otherwise, just by looking at the numbers. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So the idea for this project is actually not a new idea, because it has been done before by various historians. So what they've done is that through our language, they have managed to code out shipping routes. So these are some examples that I referenced my work on. And the next slide. Yeah. So this was the end product that I came up with based on the short time. So what I did was that I used the data taken from old shipping logs in an American shipping logs collection. And then I used RStudio in order to produce this map that showed the ports visited by American ships during the 18th and 19th century shipping routes. Next slide. Yeah, so this was basically the platform that I use. Why did I decide to use this platform? Is because it's one of the more beginner-friendly coding languages. It is also very popular amongst especially historians because it's able to handle large amounts of data, and it also has the ability to do text mining, which is a way of inputting large amount of text in order to find trends in certain keywords or in a large amount of text. And also the data can actually be uploaded online and shared with other users as well. So through RStudio, I could actually have used other data that has already been uploaded by other people as well. And that it has, as mentioned earlier, it has a variety of tools for data manipulation and interpretation. Yeah. So next slide. Yes, so these are the reference links that I use. And the next slide. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening. I'll pass the time back to Ken.
Okay, thank you, Estella. So Estella's project was done in the context, as she mentioned, of a general elective module, which my team and I offer to NTU students, and we were very happy and privileged to work with her because she really threw herself into she threw herself with gusto into the project over the course of a semester, and she has also her enthusiasm for what she has done has also infected the senior leadership of the academic group at the NIE, such that her own history lecturers are also interested in learning more about what she has done. So now, with your permission, we shall transit to the third and final sharing for today for this session, which is helmed by Terence and Tristan from the senior school at SJI, and so again, we wish in this series of 3 presentations to give you a variety of perspectives in terms of how seemingly different disciplinary domains may be approached in curriculum. Thank you. So Terence and Tristan, I'm now going to share your presentation, and
yep, I can see it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lim. Good morning, everybody. I am Terence, and with me is Tristan, and we are from St. Joseph's Institution. And today we would like to present to you our investigation on aquatic ecosystems with computer vision, machine learning, and the Internet of Things. Typically, when we as consumers think of Internet of Things, we will think of a smart home. And personally, for me, this was especially true. Next slide. So this is my house, and I have a smart TV, a set of smart sound speakers, and Google Home speakers. And together they form the Google Home ecosystem. And so this was the closest understanding I had to what Internet of Things was. And that's why I chose to work with Dr. Lim, because I wanted to further my understanding of programming beyond its simple applications into more advanced areas such as Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, and of course its practical applications beyond just theoretical knowledge. So Tristan and I came across this pond in Serangoon Gardens one day, and while it looks like an ordinary pond, upon closer inspection, we actually realized something quite curious. That is that, next slide, as you can see, all the carp in the pond, they are carps by the way, all the carps in the pond are congregated at one end of the pond or the other, but they are never at both ends at the same time. And we thought this was rather strange. Could it be because of the local microclimates, or is it something habitual? And so we were very keen to find out. Our first idea was to, next slide, was to modify a toy submarine we found lying at home. We thought that we could put in a camera and a variety of sensors inside, but obviously it was too small. Next slide. We also tried to modify the remote control to suit our purposes. Next slide. But we slowly realized that this was not feasible. So Dr. Lee, next slide. So this is a simplified schematic of our next idea. We would take a PVC pipe, and inside the PVC pipe, we would fit a bunch of computing tools, a bunch of computing boards, along with camera and a set of sensors. Next slide. And we'll produce 2 of these modules. They're identical, and we'll place each module at each end of the pond as demarcated by the red cross. Next slide. So inside of this pipe, we would have, these are the internal components. We have an Arduino board, we have a Raspberry Pi module, a power source, which is just a normal power bank that all of us know about, and a variety of sensors. Next slide. So the imaging data would come from a camera, and the sensor data, well, we are drawing from 4 sensors. It will record temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, and the pH value of the pond. So our idea is quite simple. We would take the computer, which is the Raspberry Pi, would send a command at every hour interval for the camera to take a picture. Simultaneously, it will also order the sensors to take readings. After which, we will use artificial intelligence. We'll take the image from the camera to train our artificial intelligence model to count the number of fishes at that end of the pond. And then we would correlate this to the sensor readings. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So our first starting point was also simple. We started off by finding a normal food container we had lying at home, but it needed modification. As we did not have a drill or professional tools, we just used a simple, next slide. We just used a simple iron soldering tool, typically used to solder computational components together. Next slide. So the heat was enough to melt through the plastic. So we managed to cut holes. Next slide, as seen in this picture. We used duct tape to soften, to make the edges not so rough, so it wouldn't damage the wires. Next slide. And we placed all our the brains of the module inside. So you have the Arduino board and the Raspberry Pi and the power bank. Next slide. So right now we are done with this container for electronics, which is circled red. Next slide. And now we will work on the camera dome. Next slide. The way we thought of our camera module it's like the people in this ship, they are looking out through a porthole. However, we wanted a better way of doing this. We wanted the camera to be able to tilt in any angle in the X, Y, and Z plane without having to tilt the entire module by itself. And we thought of many ways to do it, but one day I was at a playground, next slide, and zooming in, the next slide, we have, I saw this dome-shaped transparent cover, and I thought that this would be a great implementation to our module. And so we went back and we used a soldering tool to cut through, next slide, to cut through the lid of the PVC container. Next slide. And this is the final product. Okay, so after which we went to Daiso, next slide, to buy Christmas balls. And we cut the Christmas balls into half, next slide, and we fitted it upon this, the lid. And so as you can see, the camera now can be protruded outside the PVC pipe while maintaining the waterproofness and watertightness of the whole module itself. And the camera module can be tilted in any way we deem fit. So our module is now very flexible and can be used in a variety of environments. Next slide. After which we had to fit in our sensors. So these are our 4 sensors. We fitted it through the pipe. Next slide. And this is the internal view. Next slide. However, upon further reading, we realized that the dissolved oxygen sensor had to be calibrated properly. And through a bit of reading, we determined that around 1 molar of sodium hydroxide would be necessary. So we went to a chemistry lab to attain some sodium hydroxide. Next. And of course, once assembled, you have to test how waterproof the system is. So we used a shower head and to splash some water on it. Next slide. And then we took it a step further and submerged the entire module in the swimming pool. Next slide. To show scale, this is Tristan holding the pipe. It is relatively large, I would say. Next slide. So our process was essentially buying an ordinary hardware pipe that can be typically found in our toilets at home. And then we fitted it with our own, we modified it to suit our purposes by fitting sensors and computational boards into it. And that's on the right-hand side. However, Tristan and I were not very satisfied with the final product as a bit of water still got in. So we took it a step further and we approached IT for help, and they helped us, as can be seen on the right, on the picture on the right hand side, to help us professionally waterproof it. Yeah, next slide.
Well, artificial intelligence actually plays a crucial role in our investigation, but some might question why use AI in such a seemingly simple investigation to link the behavior of fish to the environmental factors. Well, our project actually requires us to draw conclusions between the number of fish at the different sites of a pond in response to the microenvironmental factors at each side of the pond. So in order to draw conclusions between these abiotic factors to the biotic behavior of fish, we have to actually take images and compare them with the sensory data that we actually record at that point of time. And multiple images of fish in order to actually count how many fish there are at the point of time and link it to the sensor data such as the temperature of the area of the pond, the pH level at the area of the pond, or the dissolved oxygen levels at the area of the pond. And in order to do so, we will actually leave the module in the pond like overnight. So, and in 1 hour intervals, the module will take readings as well as an image of the area. And this actually causes us to need to sift through multiple images in order to match them with sensory data. In order to do this efficiently, we'll be utilizing AI and more specifically machine learning for its image recognition purposes, so that we can automate the process of detecting the number of fishes at that point of time and linking it with the sensor data that we have taken. And AI is also, of course, a rising technology, which is rising in its commonality nowadays. And one of a famous example would be Tesla, where Tesla is known for its autonomous vehicles, which just utilizes AI and its image recognition purposes for its autonomous driving. Next slide. So as you can see, in this picture here, it's an example of what a Tesla AI has to detect through its image recognition functionality. It has to be able to detect traffic conditions, the different pedestrians, the different drivers, the different road conditions, traffic conditions, so that it knows when to stop, when to accelerate, when to turn left or right, or when to go straight. And well, all of these requires live image recognition functionality from the Tesla's AI. And there's an estimated amount of 1 million Teslas on the road currently, and this actually serves to an advantage to Tesla's vehicles. Next slide. As a greater number of Tesla vehicles on the road will lead to a greater number of data fed to Tesla's AI, which actually improves Tesla's self-driving capabilities, making its autonomous vehicles safer, more efficient, and more reliable. And this is actually an iterative cyclical loop that allows it to continuously improve Tesla's services. As the better their services, the greater demand for Teslas, and the more Tesla vehicles there will be on the road, which thus increases the data fed to Tesla's artificial intelligence, increasing the effectiveness of their image recognition technology, making it more safe and more efficient. And this actually plays in the context of our own project. It's actually advantageous as we are able to use it to continuously improve our image recognition functionality of our AI, so that we can draw more effective and more accurate conclusions from our investigation at the school pond. Next slide. So in order to actually investigate and experiment with image recognition for using through AI, we actually utilize Google Colab. And Google Colab is actually Co-Laboratory for short, and it's a product of Google Research. And Colab actually allows anybody to write and execute Python code through the web browser. And it's especially well suited for machine learning, data analysis, and other educational purposes as well. And more technically speaking, Google Colab is a hosted Jupyter Notebook service, which requires no setup to use. It is completely free, and it also allows access to free GPUs and also live editing with team members. And with access to GPUs from Google, it actually allows for faster machine learning and as well as downloadable projects once you're done creating your, training your AI on Google Colab. Next slide. So here are some sample images which we have to feed to our AI in order to train it to detect the object that we want. In our project, it will be a fish, but in this sample, we can see it uses a rubber duck as the object at hand. And as you can see, we actually have to utilize a image labeling function to define the object in these sample images that we want the AI to detect. And we will thus feed these images to the AI for it to train and for it to be able to detect the different fishes we have in our captured images. And actually, we have attempted this with a small amount of images, such as 3 images, and that took around 15 minutes for it to learn, to train the AI. So in order for AI to be more accurate and efficient in its image recognition, we have to feed it around more than 50 sample images, and that one can imagine how long that would take. And an example of the outcome of training this AI will be in this image here, where this is actually a snapshot of part of a video that's fed to the AI. As you can see, it actually detects the object in front of it as well as the reflection in the mirror. So, and in the green box, you can see that there's a small percentage there. So it actually tells us the percentage that the AI matches this object to what is trained to detect. And that actually serves a purpose for our project as well. Next slide. So as what Terence mentioned earlier, we'll be utilizing a Raspberry Pi board as well as an Arduino board. Well, Raspberry Pi is actually a mini pocket-sized computer that has the functionality of normal computers, and yet it has the ability to interact with sensors and essentially the outside world as well. So it being portable and compact is actually really practical for our project, as we require a small computing device to be placed in a submersible module in a school pod. So using the Raspberry Pi will be a pragmatic approach to our investigation. And an Arduino board is actually an open source electronic platform. Next slide. So Arduino actually allows us to perform simple circuitry and also to interact with more advanced technology. It allows us to actually emulate, an example would be emulating infrared waves, which are emitted from remote controllers, such as an aircon controller, to control other forms of aircons. I mean, other forms of technology, such as aircons. And Terence and I, being the president and vice president of the Coding and Technology Club in our school, we have actually interacted with Arduino a lot, and we have used it to teach members of our club how to conduct simple circuitry and also have hands-on experience with electronics as well. So in our perspective, Arduino is actually a great educational tool to utilize to teach students electronics and simple circuitry. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, we also utilize the Internet of Things in our project. So why the Internet of Things? Well, we actually required our module to sync an image as well as the sensor data at the same time to be taken and uploaded to the cloud so that we can analyze this data and draw conclusions for our investigation. And so the procedure for this would be that in every 1 hour interval, our Raspberry Pi will send a signal to the Arduino board to take sensor readings from all the different sensors. And these sensor readings will return to the Arduino board and be transmitted to the Raspberry Pi. Once the Raspberry Pi is in the vicinity and connects to a wireless network, it actually uploads these data into the cloud, where we can view these sensor data in a Google Sheet format so that it's easier to analyze, and as well as view the images in a Dropbox folder. And from there, we can feed our AI, our images that we have captured, and from there, draw conclusions for our investigations between the behavior of fish to the microenvironmental factors. Next slide. So with all investigations comes its limitations, and we have to be sure that we understand that correlation does not equate to causation. So for our project, we are merely drawing conclusions between the number of fish at a point of the pond and comparing it with the microenvironmental factors at that point in the pond. And so we understand that this is just a localized event at that school pond. So we cannot overgeneralize this for other species of fish or other aquatic environments as well. And that is something that we have to keep in mind. Next slide. So last but not least, the most important part of our investigation would be the learning process that we have went through. And the learning process actually comprises of the three main stages of natural sciences, technology, and design. Well, our interaction in natural sciences with chemistry, where we actually had to choose the appropriate chemicals to calibrate the dissolved oxygen sensor. And interacting with physics, we had to learn the Archimedes principle and also buoyancy and density to ensure that our module actually sinks to the bottom of the pond. And we also have to interact with biology, as we had to do prior literature review and readings to a carp's habitat, how fish are affected by different environmental factors so that we can form a hypothesis based on our investigation. And also technology, natural sciences used in tandem with technology allows us to actually use AI and programming of a Raspberry Pi and Arduino chip to actually help out to draw conclusions for our investigation as well. And the most important part of this project will be the design, the creation of a module from everyday materials with improvised tools. As shown earlier by Terence, we actually created a sensor module from a PVC pipe, which is commonly used in toilets or other sewage systems. And we implemented our own technology into that, such as the Raspberry Pi unit or the Arduino chip. And as such, through combining the natural sciences together with rising technologies such as AI, we were able to craft an inquiry based on an observation at a school pond. And we were able to conduct preliminary research and hypothesis crafting, prototype modules for data collection, and eventually draw conclusions to answer our inquiry question. So this investigation is actually thus a great example of how technology can be utilized for educational purposes, as it allows students to inquire, create, and develop their maker skills as well, and as well as their expertise in technology. So as such, I would like to thank Dr. Lim, Mr. Ahmed, and everyone here for listening to our presentation.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Terence. So with the conclusion of their sharing, we have also concluded our joint sharing of three separate projects with you this morning, colleagues. Ms. Chee, can I hand the time over to you?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Kenneth, Tuan, Estella, Tristan, and Terence. Yeah, so it's fascinating. I wish I could train AI to do some of my work for me. Okay, emails would be nice. So, colleagues, I trust that you are fascinated by the sharing, and I invite you to ask questions. Maybe you can just type in the chat +1 if you would like to ask any of the presenters questions, and I will call you. While you're warming up, give you some wait time. I thought that I would like to ask Kenneth as a mentor of the projects, right? Because, interdisciplinary in schools, we've been talking about it for decades, but it's quite difficult to implement because teachers, I think, feel that they might, not have the relevant disposition expertise in the different areas. So I just wanted to ask you, what dispositions do you think as a mentor, right, that teachers need to have to be able to mentor such projects, that have been shared earlier, or even like in Estella's case, to step out of their comfort zones, to learn coding. Maybe Estella can also respond to this.
Yeah.
I think there's something like a barrier for us, for many of us.
Thank you, Ms. Chee. Estella, I'll hand over to you soon, but give you also a little bit of wait time and think time. Yes, I would like to think I'm empathetic to the question, having spent the first 10 years of my career in the service itself in different schools. I think there's a short way of answering the question, and then there's a long answer, as in most things. The short answer is the dispositions I think are necessary, are most necessary are humility, open-mindedness, the willingness to fail and fail and fail and fail again, and to learn from failure, of course. The reason I say humility is because Ai Lian, as you correctly pointed out, these projects, these multidisciplinary projects demand us to cross beyond our comfort zone from the domain that we grew up with, so to speak, and the domain that we have been educated in. So at the university level, we've had to reach out to academics from other universities. But at the school level, thinking back to my own experience when I was a teacher, it truly is very dependent on the culture of the school. And I think this is where the GE schools have probably an advantage over some of the regular schools, because sometimes individual departments within the school can be very territorial, whereas the nature of GE itself already comes with a historical trajectory of mutual collaboration and cooperation and learning from each other. So, but of course, that's a huge generalization. The culture of the school really is set by, to a large extent, by the principal and senior management. But so that's my brief response to your question. Estella, do you have any thoughts that you want to share? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Dr. Kenneth. I think personally for me, it boils down to 3 reasons in helping to overcome this, I think, perhaps fear of taking on such a challenge, especially as someone who had no experience with coding. So the first was really interest. I was actually very interested in learning how to code, but there wasn't really any, structure for me to learn. It was quite difficult to learn on my own without, I think, people to help. So that's where Dr. Kenneth's team came in, because they had experienced coders with them. So they actually helped me in the learning process, which was a lot easier, I guess, as someone who has never coded. And the third reason is also actually at a university level. A lot of my friends in humanities courses have already started coding. So coding for them in a humanities course is not really new. Yeah. So that was what helped me to overcome this fear of coding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth and Estella. I think Estella, also the point you raised about having structures, it's something that also the teacher community here in this session, we can take away with us to have something like that, perhaps also in our schools, in schools that are interested to put in place such structures so that teachers have a comfortable starting point, right? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so just now I think was it Kenneth or Estella who mentioned about I think it was Estella who mentioned interest. And I read somewhere in the abstract that these projects, the student projects, are self-initiated based on interest and their curiosity. Do you think that, this is for all the presenters, do you think that something that is, because for younger children, maybe, it could, they don't even know what their interests are most of the time, and the teachers have to help them find these. Do you think that setting like a topic for them to do, where it is sufficiently open-ended enough, would generate this kind of excitement and interest? Yeah, maybe I can invite the boys to chime in. Anyone? Or must it actually be something that you think, it must come from the person themselves, the researcher?
Yes, I think, like personally, I think you both way have some correct in it, have some meaning in it, because of course, as for a student, when approaching to say just do a project, they don't know what to do. Of course, we need to give them a prompt or something. Of course, in the Namyan project, Dr. Lim did give us a prompt before we actually engage in our creative thinking ourselves. So I guess that's one way to sort of engage the student to think for themselves. So I think, yes, for me, for most students, I think we do have to give them somewhat of a prompt to be creative. Right? Like, this is the main topic. You can do whatever with it, but this is the idea that you should think about first and then do your own thing. I think that does help, but to give the students full creativity also, I think, help in some case if the students are quite creative. I think that helps the students because they are not bound by any constraints. That can help them to think of quite some, I would say, unique idea that have not been discovered before, which although rare, but I think do happen. So yes, I think for me, yes, we do need prompts, but do give the students space to explore themselves and go from the simple prompts.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Maybe Anne or anybody else also could share. What are some did you all have any background training in any of this? I know that Tristan mentioned that they are the vice president and president of the this club, right? So I think you don't need training, but for the rest of the student population who are not, right? Is it necessary to have some, maybe Kenneth can also chime in, background knowledge, maybe for a student like me? Yeah.
Tuan, do you want to say something?
I want to answer this question. So for me, I pair with Nguyen, from beginning. I have absolutely no experience at all the field that we are doing right now, which is AI and the computer science. And of course, throughout the course, I had many difficulties in actually the concepts that he chance to open my mind about new concepts. And actually, when I am in contact with it, I feel like there's a lot of things I don't know, and then I keep learning more, like reading documents, as well as him telling me about different algorithms and the things that he used, and different models that he used. And I think that you don't need an expertise to actually engage in something that you don't know, because as long as you are interested in doing it, by the course of the time doing it, you'll constantly learn more and more. And that's an experience for me when I joined the project with Nguyen. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tuan. I think something that's emerging from this conversation and the responses to Ms. Chee's question is the importance of a learning buddy, because both Min An and Min Tuan already had a history of collaboration on preceding projects, and likewise with Terence and Tristan. And Estella also mentioned the importance of peer-based encouragement. So I think that could be another factor to consider in this whole tight or loose structural ZPD design. Yeah. Terence, Tristan, I welcome any thoughts. Yeah, as usual. Ms. Chee, also, if you'd like to go to any other questions or any thoughts that may have been catalyzed.
Yeah, so there are two questions in the chat that I probably we want to, maybe I use the later one first. The first one is, what are possible hindrances in schools that students face in generating self-initiated projects? can also come from perspective of students, so the students can also contribute.
Yeah,
You know,
it
and
should
maybe
come from the
students would
perspective.
know, like the second part of the question is, what shifts in curriculum would you suggest? It would be interesting to hear also from the students because they are the recipients, right, of our curriculum.
Yes. So I think I'm in a position that I can address this question quite well, because as a student in SJI, I think the senior scholar in here can actually agree with me, because our school is not too keen on science research. I mean, they do acknowledge that we do these projects, but they are not focused on like give us quite like sort of support, because we do receive support but quite minimal from the school itself. Reason why we managed to keep our spirit high during this project is because of the wonderful team from the NIE of Dr. Lim. So yeah, but the school itself, they do give us some opportunities to take part in competitions, but the school themselves don't give us support. So that is one of the problems from this type of project. So I think because of this problem, is make it almost impossible for a sort of student who want to make their own project without any backing from like external teams or institutions. Because for us here, we got Dr. Lim as a sort of fingers that help us throughout our whole project. But for a students who, I think without backup, they would be impossible for them to initiate their own project. And I think, yes, that should be changed a lot, because a school should have provide several opportunities for students to provide, like not to provide supervisors and professionals for the students to like initiate their own project and to receive some help during that process, so that each of the students can actually explore on their potential. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Yeah. Tristan, Terence, or Estella, you want to add on? Actually, the point I wanted to say just now when I was muted was I wanted to thank Tuan for assuring us that, you know, everybody can learn. Actually, I have a friend who always tells me, she's from STEM, you know, who always tells me, if there's interest, anybody can learn. Yeah, so I think Tuan also talked about that earlier.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank Tuan in case I forget, because Tuan is coming in actually all the way from Vietnam right now. So yeah,
okay.
Thanks.
Yes,
Terence,
so
Tristan, do you have any responses that you want to add from the students' perspective in terms of structural supports?
Yeah.
Or like maybe
actually,
in curriculum, you know, like in terms of the subjects that you learn, or you know, the content that you learn, what are things which you feel that could be enhanced or taken out, or you know, maybe assessments, as Anne alluded to earlier, maybe, you know, set in a different way, and not just when there is the chance or the luck that you have meet someone like Kenneth, then you know you have this opportunity.
Well, Anne and I were from the same school, SJI. But then I was on the integrated program, and I think my experience was a bit different, because at the integrated program we had a bit more time, and I'm not sure if time is what the O-level track has. So what the school did for us was that there was this program called Signum Fide, and then basically we got the chance to work with external organizations like URA and Science Center, which is what I did. I worked with Tristan, and I worked with Science Center, and we attempted to come up with ways to revitalize the area, because as the admins at Science Center said, the only two times when a person would go to Science Center is when they're a kid and when their grandparents bringing their kids back to Science Center. And so we did have opportunities to work with external organizations, and so I think is how much the opportunities must be there, obviously, but I also saw some schoolmates who had the opportunity but squandered it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Terence. There's a question for the students again about the study of integrating technology in the study of humanities, and that some teachers may not be familiar with technology to know where to start, as we talked about earlier. Perhaps the students could offer some suggestions from their own experience, how technology can enhance the learning of humanities.
Oh, perhaps I
yeah.
can.
Estella?
Estella,
Yeah,
thank you.
Estella.
Yeah.
Actually, I was also thinking that since Samuel is here, I don't know if Samuel is still here. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's still
Yeah,
here, I
we
think.
could Miss Chee, we also have Estella's classmate in NIE. Whereas Estella is a history teacher, Samuel is a geography teacher, and he also underwent a similar program last year with me. So after Estella speaks, maybe we can invite Samuel to share his perspective as a beginning teacher as well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Samuel, maybe you go first.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, all colleagues. I wasn't part of the actual presenting team per se, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to share my, experience with the digital humanities. So, for those colleagues that also that also specialize in the geography discipline, I think the digital sciences for geography, namely GIS, is one of the biggest, I think, up and coming form of digital humanities for geography. And admittedly, it was also quite a challenge to learn basically a new language, because you're interacting with completely different completely new content and technologies in order to, conceptualize or visualize maybe geospatial data. Right? I think a big part of it was I think one part of it is just, interest, right? A general interest in maybe the discipline itself. And if you realize that, or if you are able to accept that maybe geography now, it's more than just maybe a dichotomy of human and physical, and there's also instead a third dimension, the dimension of digital, then it might help to ease the transition towards the digital humanities. Because I think a big part of it is whether or not you feel okay with the shifting paradigm, because it is that, I think that's a big part that helps. And so it helped for me, at least, because at first there definitely was a big inertia to go and pick up GIS, because do I really need to map? The thoughts that I've experienced is like, do I really need to learn how to map things using technology? Can I use existing maps and stuff like that? But when you really learn the skill yourself, you pick up the skill yourself, and you're able to reconceptualize maps or geospatial data for your own purposes, and then you start to create angles to develop your own knowledge. And I guess if you're concerned about the angle of teaching, then you are able to reconceptualize data for the purposes of teaching students, or even creating questions, maybe creating maps that you can question students on. Yep. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks, Samuel. Estella, before I hand over to you, Samuel's sharing prompted me. Actually, colleagues, there's I also supervise another pair of students who comprise one of the students is from the Raffles family, and the other is from Temasek Junior College, and their project with me is also on the digital humanities. So what they're doing is at the intersection of geography and economics, as well as AI, because what they're doing is they're looking at how geographic images taken over time can be processed using machine learning as indicators of economic development over time. Yeah. So I share this not because of anything, but because as some of you are pointing out in the chat, there was an artificial dichotomy created earlier this morning, which kind of ruffled some feathers, and actually, it seems to have worked quite well in this particular session of ours here among the 70 of us, because we are trying our best to see how all of these really complement each other rather than oppositional. Yeah.
So here, I think there was a question also. Maybe it's about very inspiring that what you have presented, and how can we harness on the students who have started to build a community of support for subsequent batches of students. So do you all actually have such a system in your school, where actually you return, like the alumni come back to serve and to mentor other juniors?
Maybe it's easier if I answer. I'll try and answer first and then give them a bit of time to think. So I mentor these, with the exception of Samuel and Estella, who are already in NIE as training teachers in training. I mentored the students under the auspices of a NTU program, and what I do is I deliberately try to engineer opportunities for the seniors to meet the juniors, or at least to interact with and be resource people to the juniors. So, for example, I've put Terence and Tristan in touch with one of with someone from NUS High who's already graduated, and he underwent a similar experience from me. And likewise, I've put Terence and Tristan in touch with someone from Anderson JC actually. And with Minh Anh and Tuan, I've put them in touch with NUS High. NUS High is an interesting example because we talked about school culture, and there's also a question in the chat from Britta from Nanyang Girls High. How can we interest and enable teachers to integrate AI into learning amidst the many competing interests? And of course, I fully acknowledge that. For me, maybe because I'm looking back on my own experience as a teacher, a lot of it boils down to culture. I'm gonna drop a few names here, not because I'm trying to show off, but simply because I'm trying to reinforce the point. In my career, I have taught in Hwa Chong, I have taught in Raffles, I have taught in Anglo-Chinese Independent, and I've also taught in a neighborhood school, which is now defunct, Shu Qin Secondary. And these experiences of mine have helped me understand the true importance and influence which we may sometimes undervalue of the culture of learning and support for experimentation and failure. It's just that certain schools, again, senior management is very, very important in this, do have a significantly large part to play in this. Britta, you also talked about languages and AI, right? We can actually, my team is actually is looking into using R, which is the language which Estella shared about, in terms of text mining and data mining, in terms of literary text. So, for example, you can analyze in terms of tone, in terms of social relationships. So, for example, you could input the whole of Macbeth into it, or Wuthering Heights or something, and you could use AI in that sense to try to deduce relationships which may not necessarily be very explicit. Yeah. So that went off on a bit of tangent, and I've actually forgotten the question, which I don't know what was the main question, and I'll hand it over back to my students now.
About the building of a community of support. Yeah. Thanks, because I actually did address that with the example of Tristan and Terence. And if the students don't have anything to add, it is also fine. And just wanted to ask a last question, because time we only have one question left, which is about the is it possible to do such projects with the entire class? Because it definitely is time consuming, and may not have schools may not have resources, or is it something that is only for a smaller group of students?
Maybe I'll just handle this one because probably our students. Okay, anyway, I'll just start off with something and then I'll open it to anybody who wants to respond. When I was in ACS Independent, I was not teaching in the GE stream, although I did do the GE modules as a trainee teacher myself. So what I did notice with the students in the GE stream as compared to my own students was that they had a lot of white space even back then, and we're talking about pre-TSLN, pre-Thinking Schools Learning Nation days in the early 90s. So I think in terms of whole class learning, you guys who are in the GE who have really a lot. Well, you've had I don't know whether it's still the case, but you've historically had a lot of latitude. I think maybe it goes back to the very first question of this session, which is the degree to which the subjects can interoperate and intercollaborate. If I were back in school, I would probably try to get, and if I were doing it whole class, I would probably try to get as many of my colleagues from other disciplines interested. And I try to do this with some of the secondary schools which I work with still. But of course, the barriers, as I said, there's still a very strong silo mentality among certain departments. Yeah, okay. I'll hand it over to my students in case they have any perspectives from their points of view.
Actually, if I may contribute some ideas, I guess, about the question, right? How do we manage such projects for an entire class? I think maybe at the secondary school level, it might be useful to scale down projects and spread it over several years. Yeah, I of course, me as just a student teacher, I don't have any concrete successful examples that I've done, but I've heard I've attended conferences from and heard other schools that successfully created a curriculum where they introduce, say, ArcGIS, the software for digital humanities, the digital geographies, right? They introduce it over 4 years in secondary 1, and then in Sec 4, their final project is to basically come up with a research assignment that is in line with the syllabus, fieldwork that basically is a smaller scale version of what has been done by the students here as well. Yeah, and then they leverage on the digital technologies to they leverage on the digital technologies to find the data, and that's how it could be done. It's a lot of work, but can be done. Yeah, these are stories that I've heard lah. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Samuel and Kenneth, and also times have changed. Mark says yes, but we do with the best with what we can. So since we can't put our hands together anymore, since we are all online, I would like to invite you to put your reactions, use your reactions to show our appreciation to Kenneth, Tuan, Estella, Tristan, and Terence for taking time off and also coming to share with us today their experiences and insights. Thank you also to all of you for your questions and for engaging with the presenters. Before we break for lunch, I would like to ask you to take 2 minutes to complete the feedback form for this morning's proceedings. You have to do another one in the afternoon for the afternoon session. And the next session will begin at 2 o'clock. We encourage you to log in by around 1:50 p.m. due to the large number of participants. Thank you and have a good lunch break.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Chief. Thank you to the branch for hosting us today. Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take a screen rest. Thanks, Kenneth.
Yes. Aileen, thanks.
Stella,
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tuan. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Tristan and Terence. And thank you, Estella and Samuel.